Well, is it time for a checkup? A CDC study shows that men are 33% less likely to visit the doctor than women.
From heart disease to mental health, Dr. David Rizzuto, Vice President of Medical and Clinical Operations at Priority Health, is here to share some common illnesses men face and provide some tips for men to take charge of their well-being. I want to start with that 33% less likely. Now, I got a theory about that.
Sure.
Before I was married, I was in the 33%. After I was married, I am no longer in that 33%.
Why are you here today? My wife made me come.
That's exactly right.
Yes, that's not an infrequent reason.
No, and that's 100%.
Yes.
And it is
Yes.
it probably proved out to be a very good thing. But why is it that men are less likely?
Yeah, and so there is some variability from men and women, and we do try to avoid just overgeneralization, right? But to that point, we all have potentially fear of getting a bad diagnosis, fear of hearing things that maybe we don't want to hear, like we need to maybe lose weight, or we need to exercise more, or we can quit smoking, or things like that. So those are a lot of the primary drivers. And then there can be other things like, well, it's too long to get an appointment, or some of those other non-medical reasons that we would sort of be avoidant of care. There's problems with that, though, because delaying health care, particularly preventative care, can lead to problems downstream, because we kind of lose our ability to impact disease states if we don't catch it early. And those routine visits are really important.
So what are some steps for men to take control of their health?
Yeah, and again, avoiding kind of overgeneralization, men and women. One of the biggest things that I recommend is to kind of demystify that office visit and go in armed with information. If you have specific questions that you want your clinician, your physician to address, write them down. So that way you know that you can address them in the moment. If you need to, if you really do have a fear of going in, bring someone else. Bring another pair of eyes in the room, right? There's a statistic that would indicate that somewhere around 80% of what a doctor and a patient actually talk about is actually remembered or consumed. And that also brings up what a physician may be telling you might not be what you're hearing. And so having a little pen and paper there to kind of, write it down and reflect it back. And we spend a lot of time doing both shared decision making and making sure that the messaging, answering questions, is very crisp and very, very to the point. So those would be just a couple of just general ways to sort of own your own health. Educate yourself, know your numbers, right? Know what your blood pressure is, maybe seek your cholesterol, et cetera, and have your questions well in advance.
Yeah, and one of the things you talked about at the beginning was that if you have to take a long time to get an appointment or do something like that, and one of the things that I've found is once you kind of get in the system and you have a relationship and you have everything kind of scheduled out, that smooths that out a lot. But and we're talking about men's health, obviously we're concerned about everybody's health, but what kind of things are men more susceptible to, generally speaking? I think people a lot of times think about heart disease, though women certainly, are included in that too.
Very much so. So heart disease is probably one of the largest disparities. It's not that women don't have heart disease, it's just that it presents differently and at different phases in life. Men are going to distinctly have an earlier onset, and there are some physiologic and biologic factors for that. Just when you think about the physiology and the mechanics of the heart and the blood vessels, men generally have a larger body habitus, and so they're going to have larger organs, and those are responding to things like cholesterol plaque a little differently. And then there's a big hormonal variation. So the drive of testosterone can really predispose towards heart attack, all-cause mortality for cardiovascular risk, heart disease, strokes, heart attack, and other congestive heart failure conditions. There's also a large variability in malignancies. So those are probably the two big areas. Cancer, women much more predisposed, obviously, to some of the female malignancies, and then men with more heart disease.
All right, Dr. Rizzuto, thank you for coming in. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.
As always.